worship style, we must be reverent. In other words, it says there in 2 Chronicles 7 verse 3, when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord on the temple, they bowed their faces to the ground on the pavement and worshiped and praised the Lord, saying, for He is good, for His mercy endures forever. Notice that they put their forehead to the ground and they bowed before the great God. You know, every great person in the Bible that encountered God was awed by His presence in the worship experience. In Isaiah chapter 6, Isaiah was permitted to see God's heavenly temple, and he heard the seraphim singing, and the posts of the temple were shaking, and the angels were singing, holy, holy, holy. And how did Isaiah feel? He says, oh, I am undone, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people with unclean lips. But when he realized that he was nothing, then God made him something, because God sent an angel to touch his lips, and his sin was cleansed, because he came to worship God in humility. When Moses met God at the burning bush, and he discovered that it was God that was in the burning bush, the Bible says that he bowed his head to the ground. In other words, he was reverent in the presence of God. When Jesus encountered Peter after the resurrection, Peter said, depart from me, for I am a sinful man. In fact, do you know where the word humility comes from? The word humility comes from the Latin humus. You know what humus is? It means dirt. It means dust. In other words, humility means that you recognize that you are dust. And what are we composed of? What did God create us of? He created us of dust. In other words, when we come to worship before God, we realize that we are but dust. But of course, in the sight of God, we are very precious dust. We must come to worship God in humility, in other words, not with a haughty spirit. Psalm 9 and verse 20 explains the importance of recognizing that we are not God, that we are simply men. It says there, put them in fear, O Lord, that the nations may know themselves to be but men. See, when we have the fear of the Lord, what do we realize? We realize that we are but what? We are but men. In other words, the fear of the Lord creates humility in us. Notice Isaiah 45 and verse 9. Isaiah 45 and verse 9. Woe to him who strives with his maker. Let the potsherd strive with the potsherds of the earth. Shall the clay say to him who forms it, what are you making? Or shall your handiwork say, he has no hands? You remember the story of Nebuchadnezzar, right? That great king of Babylon. He thought he was hot stuff. In fact, the Bible tells us that one day he went out on the balcony of the palace and he says, isn't this great Babylon that I have built with my power and for my glory? And the Lord said, oh yeah? And in an instant, God removed the pearl of reasoning from his mind. And suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar was no better than a beast. He was something as long as God gave him a reasoning power. When God removed that, he was nothing. And at the end, Nebuchadnezzar says, I now praise and honor the God of heaven because he is able to humble those who have a haughty spirit. So the fear of the Lord entails great humility. The Bible also says that fearing God entails a spirit of trust in God. It means to trust in Him. Notice Psalm 115 and verse 11. Psalm 115 and verse 11.